here, pass this. Yeah. Big earrings. So Christmas brunch next week, bring something and come. We meet in this big back room back here. It's a wonderful time of just Christmas carols and music and sharing of our hearts, and everybody has an opportunity to take the mic, which is really cool. And yes, Whitney. There is childcare. Yes, there is childcare. Thank you so much for that. Also, in the back, just a reminder that we have the Christmas marketplace, and there's a sign-up sheet on that back table in the foyer. And if you want to be a vendor next week and bring your little wares, and we'll have a table set up for you, and you can sell away. It's kind of a fun little thing that we started last year, and it was really a great hit. So if that is you and you're interested in selling something, feel free to sign up for that. So. Okay, well, I'm just going to open in prayer as we kick off our fourth conversation of this year. Jesus, we thank you so much for the opportunity to just be here today. We come into this place, Lord, and we invite your Holy Spirit to overwhelm us, to just to bring heaven down to earth in this moment so that we can step into yet another conversation and do it well, that we could do it with love and hearts that are open to understanding this particular topic, and that it would translate into our small group time where we could go back and really be challenged, Lord, in new ways to consider this particular conversation, Lord. And so we just offer this day to you. We thank you, Jesus, that you have demonstrated us fully well how to love and how to walk in relationship. And so we give this moment to you. In your name, amen. Well, before I invite up a couple amazing guests for today, I wanted to just kickstart with our topic today by showing a small little clip. So this will give you an idea of where we're headed.
There are the boomers, there's Gen X, there's my box, the millennials, but young people are covered by more than just that title. Gen Z is the next wave, and turns out there's quite a bit that makes them uniquely them.
The new kids on the block or in your office aren't just millennials anymore.
But I feel like, for me, like millennials are grown-ups.
The freshest faces are those of Generation Z, while millennials are roughly defined by being born between 1981 and 1995. Those dubbed Gen Z were born from 1996 on, with the oldest of them now in their early 20s. But it's more than just their birth years that set these two generations apart. We went straight to the source and talked to Zach, Sammy, Annabelle, and Emily, who we found the Gen Z way on Snapchat.
What do you think makes Gen Z Gen Z?
I think it's internet engagement.
We were born with it, so we don't really know a world without it, really.
While most millennials can remember life before smartphones and social media, Gen Z has never known a world without the internet in their pocket.
Literally, our friend group at school primarily communicates through Snapchat.
These platforms have caused Gen Zers to see the job market in a new way.
What does success mean to you guys now? People in our generation are really looking for is success in the way of living on your own terms.
That means looking to social media platforms for viable career opportunities, causing some to think about education differently.
Do you guys think that given social media opportunities that going to college is necessary anymore?
I really think that we're like moving towards a time where a degree isn't necessarily important.
They multitask with ease. Their digital fluency allows them to take on a lot at once, sometimes coming across as unfocused. They say it's focus, the Gen Z way.
Never on really one social media at a time. You're always on Snapchat, like you want to go see what's happening on Instagram, and then, oh, someone's texting me on WhatsApp.
Short attention spans mean trends evolve fast.
So when your parents find out about it is about the time that we're on the downhill.
As soon as it leaves the generation, then it's like, okay, they're too old for us. Like, it's not cool anymore.
Access to social media and technology has made Gen Z more global.
We're the first generation that's really grown up with the tools that make us able to connect with anybody across the world with the click of a button.
Nick Jane, Ziad Ahmed, and Shaina Zafar, all under 20, founded and run a consulting firm, helping Fortune 500 companies and startups alike reach Gen Z successfully. Cole Maddox runs a hedge fund from his dorm room. They want you to know they're ready for a seat at the table, especially since Gen Z is now the largest percentage of the population at over 25%, and represents up to $143 billion in buying power.
we're positioned, right, to overtake millennials as the largest generation by the end of 2019. Right? If you don't start working with us now, and you're gonna miss the boat.
And don't underestimate what else they're up to on their phones.
So give me a short answer to older people saying to you guys, you're just always on your phone.
You have no idea what I'm doing.
We're not just sitting on our phone ignoring the world around us. We're sitting on our phone interacting with hundreds of people.
This generation wants you to know just because they care about followers doesn't mean they don't care about friendships, and doesn't mean they're disconnected from what happens in the world.
We as a generation, we're so diverse. We're also the most inclusive generation. Like, we know as a generation what we want to see in our leaders.
Young people have always been standing up for things, always been disrupting the status quo, always been rewriting trends. But what's unique about our generation is that the tools that we have access to allow for these disruptions to become mainstream.
Right? Nice. Well, so there's your introduction as to where we're going today. Generation Z, also known as iGen, because they have an iPhone, iPad, etc. in their hands. If you see on the screen, generally it's like the mid-90s is kind of when they mark it. Different people will look at different statistics, but in essence, this kind of broad age range means that the kids who were mostly impacted by the millennials were mostly impacted by 9/11, whereas Generation Z doesn't really remember 9/11 and the impact that it had on our world. They just stepped into a world where it was impacting us. And so they were too little to even understand what really happened. So that's a big marker, I think, that a lot of people choose to use that generation terminology from. So we're going to get into it today. First, I wanted to share with you this scripture. Let's see if I put it up there. Psalm 78, 4-7. We will not hide these truths from our children. We will tell the next generation about the glorious deeds of the Lord, about his power and his mighty wonders. For he issued his laws to Jacob. He gave his instructions to Israel. He commanded our ancestors to teach them to their children, so the next generation might know them, even the children not yet born, and they in turn will teach their own children. So each generation should set its hope anew on God, not forgetting his glorious miracles and obeying his commands. We have a calling, sisters in Christ, and it is to recognize and to see this next generation coming up. These are our kids today. These are our youth. They're our college-age kids who are just now starting to graduate from college and are entering the workforce. And we need to, more than ever before probably, I believe, we need to understand this generation like never before. Instead of seeing them as odd, we don't get you, we're discouraged and disappointed in you. Sometimes we even shame them. We're going to talk about that a little bit. But for me, I know what has happened with me. I have 3 Gen Z children. And so what's happened for me as I've taken a look at this really openly and just with a heart of like, Lord, show me what kind of humility I need to walk in as I approach understanding this generation better. I was reminded of a time when Patrick and I moved overseas right out of college. We moved to Eastern Europe. We moved to the Czech Republic. And I remember stepping into this new language, foreign land, didn't know anything, strange customs, and thinking, these guys are very different than me. And yet I didn't bombard into the Czech Republic and say, you know what, you guys all have to change the way you're thinking. It's messed up. I didn't do that, and nor does any ever a missionary that steps into another culture. We don't go in and try to make them look like us. We step in with a heart that says, you guys do things differently. I need to understand that. I need to know your language, your customs, why you eat that, why you drink that, what is that? And I believe that metaphor plays out really well when we say we got to understand Gen Z, millennials to a degree as well, although they're kind of young adults now and they're kind of already doing it. And so we're going to focus today mostly on Gen Z because I know that for most of us, it's our kids, it's our grandkids, nieces, nephews, maybe even some siblings. And so this pertains to all of us. So without further ado, I am bringing up two of my most favorite women in my life up to the stage, Jamie Eichler and my own daughter, Jocelyn Day. Come on up. This is really cool for me. So cool. This is so special. So Jamie Eichler, if you have never had the pleasure of meeting her before, she has been our area Young Life Director in Wilsonville for the past 8+ years. She just recently accepted a position at the regional office, so she's big cheese now, but she's still sticking around and helping out Wilsonville. She mentors the senior girls at the high school amongst many other youth in our community and has been doing that a long time. We love her and we're so grateful for the wisdom you bring. Jamie is a millennial, and so she's got a unique millennial perspective on Gen Z, which is awesome. And then my beautiful daughter, who kind of rounds out the older edge of the Gen Z. She's 22 and married, and she also works with Young Life Wilsonville. She has a group of girls that are now sophomores that she's been mentoring since middle school. And has great relationships with them. And then recently, she was named the Capernaum director over in Lake Oswego for their ministry. And if you don't know about Capernaum, it is the ministry that Young Life has to kids with special needs. And so my daughter is over there rocking it with all these kids that are just amazing, and they love her. And they're not all kids, because I think, honestly, the oldest is like 40. But you know, they bring them all together, and like 60 of them, and it's amazing. So love that you guys are here, and we're going to hear all about your hearts today. So right now I'm going to run through some kind of fast facts with you about Gen Z. I'm going to kind of set the stage, let Jocelyn and Jamie interact where they want to, and then I'm just going to have some dialogue with them at the end. So first of all, I wanted to make sure that you guys understand out there, if you're not sure what your generation is, this is an ish. So traditionalists, those are our elders. The baby boomer generation, Generation X, which I fit into that one, millennials, and then Gen Z. So you can kind of see the ages there of what kind of breaks it down. And a lot of times you'll see people who differ on some of these, but in general, they find characteristics and descriptors about each generation, and largely they are influenced by cultural moments, things that have happened. The JFK assassination, for example, would affect a baby boomer a lot more profound than someone like me from Gen X, where I'm like, I don't really remember that. I just remember you telling me about that. Likewise, Gen Z and 9/11 versus millennials and understanding 9/11. So sometimes those markers are there for that. So just to give you a further idea of the difference between millennials and Gen Z, Taylor Swift and Zac Efron are millennials. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. Whereas Zendaya and Shawn Mendes are Gen Z. Yeah. I had to ask my son, I'm like, can you give me 2 really cool, pop artists of your age? Just being honest. I do recognize them, but I was like, wow, that's a stretch. Okay. To give you an idea of the difference as well, millennials, you can kind of see up there some of their logos, some of the things like, Pokemon and Nickelodeon, Blockbuster Video, they were still, going to Blockbuster back then. All the things that differentiate, Furbies, and I don't even know. And then you kind of get over, and yes, they started being introduced to Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and those things, but it was a little bit later for them, more like late high school, college for most of the millennials, whereas Gen Z has never known a time that they did not have access to the internet. And so you can kind of see that's kind of a fun little screen of that one. Major lifetime events for Gen Z, like I mentioned, I'm going to get into these a little bit more detail, but post 9/11, they were post the recession of 2008. That really impacted many of them. They had their first African American president. They've never known anything else than a black president. Isn't that, just wrap your mind around that for a second. They've never known why there would have never been one before. They came along with the polarizing election of 2016. They are living in the first post-Christian nation. We're going to talk about that more. They've seen 68 school shootings since 1999, Columbine. They've been born in the midst of a war on terror. Same-sex marriage was legalized in their generation, 2015. And they are considered digital natives, meaning they've never again known anything but having access to the internet at all times. And they are the most diverse generation ever in the history of the U.S. American history. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more as well. So really quickly, I just want to give you guys access to where I've been geeking out the last couple of weeks on Gen Z, and it is through Barna Research as well as Impact 360 Institute. They did this massive study, And if you go to whoisgenz.com, you can find their study where they pulled thousands of teenagers between the ages of 13 to 18 to put together this research. They are a Christian group. So they're coming at it from a Christian analysis. And so a lot of the facts and figures you see today are going to be more of the general rule for Gen Z. But you will see in this report, if you decide to download it, that it actually breaks down the engaged Christians of this generation versus the kids who have no walk with Jesus whatsoever. And so I just wanted to make sure you have that resource because that's where I got a lot of this info from. So the first thing that they say, and this is where Joss and Jamie, feel free to interact with me. What's shaping Gen Z? They are called screenagers. Technology, this is their digital native thing. They've never known a time without screen access. They have this thing called nomophobia, which, by the way, I experience as well. It's the feeling of anxiety anytime you're separated from your phone. Nomophobia. They are physically safer, but psychologists are saying they are psychologically more vulnerable than ever before. They are global. They are multitaskers. They are all about instant gratification because they've never known a time to not order Amazon and have it delivered next day, or food for that matter. They are hypersexualized, a hypersexualized nation where they've had instant access to all of the things that we wish they didn't at the tip of their fingertips, which means it leads to a lot of addiction, not only addictions to their phones, but addictions to porn and other things like that. They have been cyberbullied. They have access to immediate news and tragedy and real images, which brings an awareness to their complex world that is very scary. And there are neurological implications that are still being studied on what this has been doing to them, potentially. Let me see if I get to that. Gen Z at a glance. I just wanted to read this stat, and then you guys be thinking where you might want to insert. Teens 13 to 18 years old are twice as likely as adults to say they are atheist, 13% versus 6%. That's a huge double jump than any generation ever before. About half of Gen Z is non-white. Can't read this from here. They are the most racially and ethnically diverse generation in American history. Half say happiness is their ultimate goal in life at 51%. What does happiness entail? For 43% of Gen Z, it means financial success, money. They're really financially driven to make money. More than half of teens use screen media 4 or more hours per day, 57%, but 26% of them actually use it 8 hours or more per day. And in my household, I would argue that's a higher percentage than, yeah, it should be higher. That's my point. 1/3 reports being bullied online, 33%, compared to only 1 in 5 adults. So just a quick little thing on screenagers. Any thoughts that you guys would add to that?
Yeah, I was just gonna add in about diversity. A little splurge personal experience. So, I mean, Wilsonville, in the grand scheme of things, is not super diverse.
What?
But, yeah, surprising. But my freshman year, went to school in Colorado at Fort Lewis College, which is one of the only schools left where they offer free tuition to Native American students. And so even like growing up, if you don't grow up somewhere diverse, not only is it accessible at different colleges that you go to, wherever you go, but also we live in a world where the world is right at our fingertips. And so just all around you is diversity, and you're seeing all about it on social media. So it's just kind of all in your face all the time.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to share this thought. Have you guys ever felt the phantom ring, where you like feel like your phone is vibrating, but it's not actually on your person? Well, they've done research that like our body gets the synapses. What is that called?
Yeah, the synapses.
And you crave that, and so your body creates like phantom rings in response to that. And so I joke about that with kids when I shared this with high schoolers one time. Like, how many of you guys feel that? And so it's crazy that technology is actually changing our bodies and our responses and what we crave.
Wow, that's deep too. Okay, we're going to get into that a little bit more. The second thing that's shaping Gen Z is that their worldview is post-Christian. This is that they were not born into a Christian culture. This is the first generation ever. We have to remember that when we in the older generations were born into and raised in, quote, Christian cultures, not this group of kids. They're being raised in a time where it is not happening, and so the percentage of people with an actual biblical worldview in this generation is 4%, compared to 10% of boomers. And so it keeps gradually going down. Millennials were 6%, Gen Z is 4%, meaning they do not know the Bible. They do not know truth. They don't understand moral absolutes because they're being taught in a culture something completely different. And again, that whole atheist, that more of them are claiming that they're atheist or agnostic. Many are a spiritually blank slate. And that means they're going to be drawn to things that are spiritual, but we're going to have to really guide them as to what that looks like. Their starting point is completely, vastly different from previous generations. So I think that's a really important stat to know as well. Here's just kind of where you can look up and see the following best describes your religious faith. This is how they answered. You can see Christian is still under Gen Z, 42%, but you can see the decline since our elder generations is just slowly going down. The second one is Catholic. You can see the Catholic percentage going down as well. And then other faith is right underneath that. And then it gets into agnostic, atheist, and none of these. And so each generation is moving further and further away from Christianity and a biblical worldview. That's pretty impactful. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think Jocelyn and I can both share Young Life is for non-church students to have the opportunity to hear about Jesus. And so I don't know how many cabin times I've had where we sit down at camp and we share about Jesus with them, and then they ask like a really basic question about the Bible that you're just like, wow, like, oh, so Christmas is like the birth of Jesus? That's what that is? Or just something like that. I don't know. Share some question you've gotten.
Yeah, oh man, so many different questions but most the simple. Usually at Young Life we kind of go through the story of Jesus, like the very basic, he died for us, he loves you, yada, yada, yada. And it's been so amazing over the years to hear from the girls like, oh, why did he send his son to die for us? Like, why would he do that? Or just like simple little things where I'm like, well, it makes sense to me, but they just did not grow up with the Bible and grew up so unchurched. So yeah, cabin times are always so interesting.
And it means for you guys, I'm sure, that you can't really go into those situations and make any assumptions that they have any backgrounds whatsoever. In fact, your assumption is probably that they don't have any background. And that's very different, because I think I operate in my world thinking most people know about Jesus and that they at least have some biblical background. And what you're saying is not this generation. And so that is completely unique and different. Creates such an important perspective when we think about this gen. Okay, another at a glance. 3 in 10 non-Christian teens say the problem of evil is a barrier to faith, 29% of them. Christians' hypocrisy and the conflict between science and scripture are other common hurdles for them. Only about 1 in 4 among all Gen Z believe science and the Bible are complementary, 28%, compared to almost half of boomers and more than 1/3 of Gen X. So they cannot resonate with the Bible and science anymore. They're really going, they're completely different. Therefore, the Bible seems very irrelevant for them. 4 out of 5 church-going teens say church is relevant to them, so that's 82%, but the same proportion agrees church is a good place to find answers to live a meaningful life, 82%. So a lot of these who are engaged and going to church are like, we get it, we think it's important. 3 out of 5 Christians who don't think church is important say, I find God elsewhere, 61%. Non-Christians who avoid church are more likely to say it's not relevant to me. 1 out of 5 teens chooses a negative, judgmental image to represent a Christian church, but one out of every 3 opts for a cross, which is emotionally more neutral. And you'll see that crosses, obviously, in this generation, they wear them for good luck. They wear them for a lot of things. It's on their shirts. It's on their shoes. I mean, do you guys have any thoughts on that, the whole cross in the Gen Z generation? Like, is that?
I just don't think it represents as much to this generation as it has other generations. And so it's more, they have cute rings with the cross on it and don't really understand the meaning of the cross, but it's cute, so that's all that matters. But there's just this lack. It kind of goes back to biblical literacy, this lack of biblical literacy and just understanding, so they don't understand the importance of it.
It's good. So, difference. The next thing shaping Gen Z is that safe spaces are normal. These are the designated areas or warnings to avoid things that might be emotionally distressing or offensive. So you can opt out of discussions that make you feel uncomfortable. Gen Z does not like to make people feel bad. They do not like to. So therefore, they won't engage in controversial conversations often. They won't give their opinions. They don't want to stand apart and be different. This is a part of their pluralistic, inclusive, moral relative culture, which I'm going to talk about, that frowns on passing judgment. They are deeply reluctant to make declarative statements, and as a result, they struggle with anxiety and indecision when it's time to actually give an answer or to act on it. I wanted to point out that idea of moral relativism. It's that idea of the you do you culture. You know, you do you. As long as what you're doing doesn't affect me, I don't care. I don't care. You do you. And so the definition of relativism is that there's no universal or absolute set of moral principles. Societies make their moral choices based upon their unique beliefs, customs, or practices. No one is objectively right or wrong, so we should just tolerate all opinions. And the appeal for this thought, by the way, it's not just Gen Z, it's the entire culture surrounding that's been leading up to this point. They've just been born into it, is a desire to be accepted and to accept others. It's a very empathetic place of going, we just want to accept people and love them where they are, so we're not going to rock the boat. And that is very different from the older generations. I could attest to that. Any thoughts on that, you guys?
Yeah, well, I go to school at George Fox University, and I don't know if you've seen all over the news. So this kid actually got a shout out from Taylor Swift, which is crazy at my school, but he came out we do these lip sync battles at George Fox, and so he came out during it and had these signs with like these rainbows on it, and it's just been this huge uproar in kind of our little community lately, and it's been so interesting to see like different professors and faculty members versus like us students, and that we're much more like, well, we just love him, you know, like, and then there's this opposite end of the spectrum that's like, well, no, this is like our foundation, this is what we believe. And so it's been a very interesting, I mean, talking to my mom about it and so many other people about it, how we are living in these two different places of like more older generations, this truth, and we're operating so much more out of this place of like love and understanding, where we should meet somewhere in the middle, you know?
Yeah, I would just say that I think this generation, they don't see groups of people like other people see groups of people. They see people inwardly, and it's kind of interesting that it's like more Christ-like or more like Jesus, even though they don't particularly know him.
Isn't that good? Yeah, it's so good. Wow. The fourth thing, what's shaping Gen Z is they believe real safety is a myth. This is very different. They don't remember living in a country at peace. Think about it. They were born into a time where 9/11 happened, war on terror, ISIS, and they've had their phones in their hands at all times. So they are instantly being given access to Amber Alerts that flash all at the same time. Someone was just kidnapped. A news flash that there was another school shooting at such and such a place. They are instantly seeing news images that maybe most of us in our childhoods would have never even known about. We were oblivious. We'd be at school, we didn't have phones, and even if our parents had on the radio or the TV or the news at home, did we really pay attention? These kids are in tune, and it has created an incredibly unsafe, insecure world for them. And a lot of them are operating out of tons of fear. They share a collective suspicion that true security is unattainable, or at least out of their control. They're not so optimistic on what evils even need defeating. Their social awareness, which is right around the recession of 2008, gave them a very dystopian slant on all their books and the movies. Think about it. Right before, in the millennial era, it was Harry Potter and good versus evil, you know, good always wins. And suddenly, they've been raised in an era of Hunger Games and Divergent and all these places where the future really isn't very secure and it's kind of a mess, and you just have to try to do whatever you can to fix it. So therefore, they have this strong sense of responsibility. They also have this entrepreneurial drive to actually fix it, to feel more in control. They're the ones out protesting right now, global change, because they care. They think that they were born into a world that's really messed up, and it's really bothering them, and so they want to make a change. So there's some beautiful things coming out of it, but also fear that is just leading the way, and it has produced more anxiety, more depression, and the even higher suicide rates. This is what they're called, the stressed out generation. When they were asked what is the percentage of how much you're stressed by issues on the national news, you can see Gen Zs in the red and adults overall. 75% of Gen Zs are stressed about mass shootings, stressed about the rise in suicidal rates, 62% compared to 44%. 58% of them, climate change and global warming, 57% to 45%, separation and deportation of immigrant and migrant families, 53% compared to 39% about the widespread sexual harassment and assault reports. They have a high view of what's going on in our world that seems very scary and very fearful. And so their suicide rates have gone through the roof. They've increased 56% in the last decade. And so it kind of gives you some of those percentages right there. So that's the thing that's increased. What has decreased is teen pregnancy, drug and alcohol use. I think juuling and smoking's up, but the other two are down. But what's increased is suicide. So it's a really kind of, yeah, speak to that, you guys. How are you seeing that play out in real time in your youth?
I actually just found out about this a couple of weeks ago, but at George Fox, it's a smaller school, but we're known a lot for like our nursing program, and the business program was great too, and there's a couple other in there, but this like freshman class apparently has the biggest people who are majoring in like sociology and social work and just majors that are catered towards like really like wanting to change the world. And so that was something really interesting, especially talking about this and how there's this really want and need in this generation to make big changes in our world.
Yeah.
I guess from my perspective, I think that the sin and the darkness of the world isn't maybe any different from previous generations, but their awareness of it and their access to it is there. And then sin breeds sin, and so it's just gonna keep evolving. And yeah, I think it's sad. I mean, I don't know very many high school girls that wouldn't say that they're anxious or experience anxiety at some point. So it's sad.
Mm-hmm. What I do love about this generation, in a book that I've been reading on millennials and Gen Z, The New Copernicans, he talks about how this generation and millennials are so driven to do something about it. They are doers. And so they are much more, the older generations tended to be, we would learn about it, sit and listen to lectures, and so we were all about the head, and then eventually that head stuff we all learned in scripture would trickle to our hearts, and then maybe that would finally move us to do something with our hands and do action. These generations are hands, and then heart, and then head. They want to go do it. So you give them an opportunity to sit at a conference and learn from speakers and go to a concert, or you give them an opportunity to go serve overseas and go build a water well in Haiti, and they will sign up for that activity, that missions trip like this, and none of them will show up to the event where they listen to speakers. It's fascinating. So just a completely, and I really do believe with the author that your guys' generations look way more like Jesus. Really, truly. To do and to be and to step into humanitarian crises in these moments is pretty impressive. So the fifth thing, what's shaping Gen Z is they are diverse. And Jocelyn talked about this earlier. The 2016 kindergarten class was the most diverse generation ever. For the first time ever, 49% are white, as opposed to 51% that are other minorities now. So that is finally changing in our nation. So you can understand why they have an incredible ability to have complete acceptance of people who are different than them. They've been raised in a world where it's very diverse, and because they're so globally aware, they're very accepting of people from different languages and people groups and sexual orientations. And what's interesting is that they say that they have a deep sense of empathy as a result of that. They really care about people, and I can't help but think that that's a whole lot like Jesus too. What? So that's really good. Sorry, I got excited about that. Anything else to add to that before I get to this next part? Sorry, I fast forwarded. Okay. The sixth and last one is that their parents, that would be me, Gen X, some of you who might be high-end millennials, but maybe not. Yeah, some of you millennials, and then maybe some of you baby boomers who had children a little bit later in life. We are seen as being double-minded. And what that means is that they not only say, yes, you are helicopter parents, always hovering around your children and overprotecting them and not wanting to let them screw up or fail or take risks, and therefore they've been coddled and they don't even know how to fail well. And we were all about making sure you guys were achieving, and high achieving, push you guys to be the best in your class, the best on your sports teams, club teams, all these things. And we were really trying. This is me kind of moping a little bit, because we were trying our best with what we knew. But on the other side of it, the reason why double-minded is because many of us were told we were helicopter parents. And so we went, well, I'm not going to be a helicopter parent. So the opposite also happened. And suddenly we became less unprotective. So keen were we to avoid the label. And the truth is likely a combination of both of those extremes. We were probably over-involved in many of the wrong ways and too detached in others. And so you can see this play out, and I don't want to be too depressing because it's very depressing for me, but in 2011, the University of Tennessee did a study with their college students, and it found that students with helicopter parents were more likely to take medication for anxiety, depression, or both. And then in other studies, Gen Z is very self-directed because parents who would rather err on the side of being too loose than too strict. And so as a result of this kind of double-minded parenting, the problem is that, and this is a quote from Barna Research, in an age of social media, pornography, self-harm, cyberbullying, and sexting, children need greater protection than ever before, not less. Thanks to their parents, Gen Z is growing up too fast, and childhood has slowly evaporated in the name of independence and freedom. And instead of being formed and disciplined by their parents, screenagers are increasingly shaped by the media. And that's a little bit of the wah-wah to this whole thing for me. It breaks my heart to think that we just didn't know. We didn't know any better, and we gave access to things that we just didn't know we shouldn't have as parents. And so, yeah, we were so overprotective in some areas and then completely negligent in others. And so for those of you with really little ones that are sitting here today, fix what we did not do well. But how does that play out in your guys' world? Just that kind of parenting that has been a little bit double-minded.
I'm sorry about this.
Go ahead.
Share a story
Put your
about
mic
you.
up close. Share a story. Share away.
When I was like in sixth or seventh grade.
Sixth grade.
These guys, she remembers it. These guys were like talking about this really cool website, in middle school, and so I was like, yeah, I want to check out this website, and it ended up being a porn website, and so I freaked out, and had a very guilty conscience, like would get a boyfriend and then would be scared to tell my parents, but would start crying at night because I didn't tell them, and so I thought I would go into the bathtub and just cry and try to cleanse myself of what I'd seen. And so my parents came in, and
I came in.
Yeah, well, she saw me just bawling, and I told her all about it, and it was so interesting because like they were talking about, they didn't really know how much access there was
mm-hmm.
in our generation, and how, even just talking about it, these sixth grade boys were talking about it, and I thought it was a cool website, and it was just so interesting in that moment because it was such a just impactful moment for me and I just wanted to like be hugged by my parents and be like, no, it's okay, and then they grounded me for like a month for going on this website, and I was like, but I didn't know any better, and granted I wasn't allowed to be on the computer anyway, so it made sense, but it really is.
I did something right.
But really it was this kind of moment of like, even our cerebral cortex, mine isn't even formed yet. It takes until 25, and so there's so many important moments that happen in like your children's lives where there's such a need just to be wrapped in like their parents' arms and to be loved in that moment and not feel shame, because there's so much shame already in the world around them. And I think, sorry, I know that's a really bad story. You're incredible.
That's a great story.
But it's true. Just in that moment, I just needed to be, hugged by my mom and told it was okay.
Yeah. I hope I hugged you.
You did.
Okay.
You did. You prayed over me.
I might have been mad at first, but I like to think I prayed, and then okay. We cried together. Okay. Yeah. It did have a happy circle story at the end.
Yeah. Sorry to
put you
Jamie, what about you? What are you seeing in the world of, like, you're working with parents all the time. Well, you're working with the kids and the parents. And
Yeah. Gosh, I was just thinking, my experience, I guess I've kind of been a leader with high schoolers since like 2004, so I've kind of seen lots of different, I knew her when she was in middle school, iterations of technology and how it affects kids. And I remember earlier on where parents didn't understand the apps, and it was almost like if the kid didn't explain to their parent what this was, they could get away with it, and then somebody else's mom would inform them what that app did, and then all of a sudden they would get in trouble for it. And so I walked through lots of times with parents talking to me about that, or asking me, what do I do with this? Should I put limits on this? Is this going to push them away? And I just remember having lots of conversations about that. And kids are savvy. They could hide lots of things, and parents would have no idea. And I kind of sat in this weird place in between of like a mentor in their life. Like, do I tell their parent? Do I not tell their parent?
tell their parent. Oh.
I think I did sometimes.
It's tricky. It's tricky when you're mentoring, yeah.
I probably was double-minded in myself, too, so.
Yeah, so tricky. So we come to the end of this kind of like the 6 things that Barna said. These are the things shaping Gen Z, but let's really get to kind of the heart now for you guys. What would you say when I ask you, what makes Gen Z unique compared to other generations? Like what do you guys think really stands apart? You might have heard some of those things already, but is there anything else you want to add to that, making them unique?
I think they're just like the most creative, loving, intuitive people, you know. They love people well, they do things with intention, and as they might seem the most distracted with something in front of them, it has a purpose, and I guess we could understand that more if we ask more questions. But I think they're a really beautiful generation in like an artistic way.
That's good.
I think that they're just hungry for purpose, hungry for belonging, hungry to understand the world around them, a world that is so complicated. I mean, most of the girls I lead come from broken homes, divorced families, you know, different abuse in their life, and so they just want to understand a greater love and a greater purpose. So I think they're just in this constant state of seeking.
That's really good. That's really good. So briefly, technology, obviously, these phones, this keeps coming back, right? Because it is a common area of concern and frustration for us as parents. Although it's interesting that this is the first generation that is influencing the older generations, because if you think about it, technology is also influencing us. So it's a trickle-up culture influence. I mean, I have my phone with me at all times. I'm using it all the time. I have to put boundaries for myself. And so what would you guys say to parents, grandparents? How do they walk beside their kids with these iPhones? And what would you suggest? What are the good things and the negative things about the iPhones?
Can I start this and then you can give some advice, because you were. I guess my encouragement to you would be to realize that you grew up in a school and there was a culture or like a standard, a norm, you know, like social groups or whatever. And think about that today is all out there on this device for them. And so I kind of have some grace and compassion for them rather than shaming them for having their culture on this device, because that is all they know, and that's how they're trying to relate to their world and their peers and sports and culture and everything. And it's literally a social world. So they might be alone in their room, but they are so trying to connect with others out there. And so I guess as much as we could understand, which we can't if we didn't grow up like that, but that is their social group. That is their social life. So
it's really
how
good.
do we deal with that?
It's really good.
Yeah. Oh, man. Well, I feel like leading these sophomore girls, and I mean, even just from my perspective, because I grew up with a phone in hand too. I remember my phone getting taken away because, you know, I wasn't always such an angel child.
Most of the time.
But I remember my phone getting taken away and just being so upset and having such bad, have you guys ever heard of FOMO? Yeah, probably. Just having such bad FOMO.
Fear of missing out,
yeah,
FOMO.
Because I knew that there was a group message going on without me, or that people were Snapchatting, talking about their plans for the weekend without me, and now it's even more so. I mean, these girls will get their phone taken away and like everything is right there on that phone. And so it just really is like, it almost enables this fear in them of like, well, I'm missing everything. I'm missing the whole world around me. And I think that really is what it is to them. It's kind of, it's a sad but also kind of cool thing in that like everyone's so connected on this device, but how attached everyone is to it.
Mm-hmm. And obviously that creates something. So there's the positive parts of that. The negatives are that we do, as parents, need to set boundaries and put things in place to protect them. And I think that's where my generation was a little bit negligent, because we didn't really understand. So hopefully newer parents can start, you know, not allowing some of those apps, taking off internet, you know, Safari off their phones, whatever they need to do to help protect their child's world from that kind of. But sadly, my frustration was that all parents didn't do that. I might have been working really hard to try to do that for my kid's sake, but other parents weren't doing that, so then my kid would just be on a bus with somebody else showing him porn. And I'm like, really? I've worked really hard to not allow my son to have access to that, and then this kid, you know. So it is a frustrating and discouraging world at times when it comes to this technology. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think another point to add to, I think that there's just, I mean, there's so many different apps. I don't even understand all of them, but there's so many different ones out there that kids are using now. And I feel like a lot of times I would feel like with my parents, like, well, why are you using this? What's going on here? Like, I hear this is used for inappropriate things. And so there's like almost shame about what I was using and because of what other people were doing and stuff, and not, I think there's this real need for parents and family members to meet the kids right where they are and try to understand where they are and what the use of it is to them, to, like Jamie said, to offer more grace in that.
And just side note that the moment that you finally download that app yourself as a parent and you start engaging in it, I mean, we all did that with Facebook, right? And all of our kids left Facebook now. None of them are on Facebook. And then we went to Instagram, and now they're off Instagram. And the next thing is probably Snapchat, and they're going to get out of Snapchat and go to that. So they're always trying to kind of find their private place where parents are not. Well, they don't want great grandma Bertress saying, "Oh, I love that. Be safe, honey. Would you like me to come pick you up after your party?" But that's what happens, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, Grandma, you're killing my jam," you know. So
yeah, that's why they have Sinsta and Shinsta and private Snapchats and locked TikTok accounts. Like, they don't want you to see them, for sure.
Yeah. So just being aware. Okay. So there's obviously some scary things that go along with that. Boundaries we have to put in place. Engage in conversation for understanding why they're doing this, not shaming them for something that is part of their culture. What are the positive attributes that you guys really think Gen Zers are bringing to our world, to this culture today? What are the we talked about some of those things briefly. Like, I think the diversity is huge. The fact that they can actually teach us how to love across all, you know. Is there anything else positive-wise that you guys really see? Jamie, you mentioned a few things too. Anything additional? Don't want to miss anything. They're empathetic. They're very open. They seem to be open to a lot of things.
I think this is a very justice-driven group of people who desperately want to make this world better. And so I think that's such a beautiful thing. I think that social media provides a really incredible tool for that, for them to be able to post about all these different, like, Black Lives Matter, Me Too movements, and get involved in that right from their own home. And so I think that there is this desperate kind of longing in their heart to make change, and I think that also leads to this longing within them for like a greater purpose, which is really, really awesome.
Yeah, that's a really great segue, because I want you guys to talk to us next and to wrap this up with, how do we influence this generation in matters of faith? I mean, we as Christian moms, grandmas, aunts, we're trying to come alongside of, and how do we best serve this generation? How do we lead them towards Jesus in a world that is completely telling them the opposite? And it's frustrating, and a lot of us are kind of like, what do we do? What do you guys speak to that?
Because they are lonely or connected in a different way than we are, we are all created for relationship, and there's a need for them to be face to face with somebody and have a relationship and have somebody care for them. And so, just like Jesus did, he not only gave us the gospel, but his very life as well. I think whoever is in your life, they crave relationship. And so if there's any way that you can show up in their world and sit across from them over lunch or coffee, or coach them or mentor them or tutor them, anything that is human interaction, they crave. And it might be painful for you because they might be looking at their phone, or they might seem distracted, or they might not appreciate what you're doing for them. But years later, they will, and you're making a huge impact. And so, in Young Life, we use this phrase, earn the right to be heard. And I would encourage each of you women to earn the right to be heard in some millennial or Gen Z's life. You have a lot to offer them, just as much as they have to offer you. But really, all they want is you. I think it's true for anybody, but to sit in front of you and them in front of you, and to ask questions, and to show genuine care and love, and share the love of Jesus with them, and they'll share the love of Jesus back with you, whether they know it or not. So
it's good, Jamie. It's a good word. Yeah.
You nailed that. Yeah, I just think that we are in such a culture right now with these generations that there is such a need for relationship and this form of relational ministry. I share this example all the time, but I mean, at Young Life, we'll throw these big events we call clubs where, we'll get, we had this one where we got a line dancer, instructor person in, and made it this huge thing, and we're posting it all over social media, and 10 kids came. And then, a couple weeks later, we threw, just had something at someone's house where they could just come get food and hang out with people, and someone would share a little message, and there was 60 kids there. And so it just truly is. I mean, my girls, they don't want to go to these great events with me. They will come to the grocery store with me, to go run errands with me. They just want to be with you. And I think that there's a lot of fear, I think, in parents especially, to come into their kids' world and lead, whether it is in Young Life or through something else. But these kids need you. They desperately need your wisdom and your heart, and need to learn, because you all have so much to offer. I mean, I know I've been blessed by so many incredible mentors in my life, and so there's just such a desperate need for these kids to know Jesus through you guys.
Yeah, I remember listening to Chap Clark years ago, and he said that every young person should have at least five significant adults speaking into their lives at all times. And if 2 of those are parents, then that's 3 other people that are desperately needed. And we all know that we as parents oftentimes aren't the ones who can speak into our children's lives. I know for me, I was rarely that person who could speak into my teenagers' lives. And so to have other people that could, just as Jocelyn, I remember taking, a group of 20 plus kids to camp every summer for years of all your friends. Jocelyn's friends loved me. They thought I was the coolest thing. They called me D. They would call me when they needed me. And yet my daughter was like, yeah, Mom, you're my mom. So that's a thing. But to your kids, you may not be cool, but to your kids' friends, you are cool. They think you're all that, and they are willing to sit at your feet and listen to what you have to say in a completely different way. And so, yeah, it's that relationship piece, inviting them into community. I know that's part of your heart with Young Life, is that you guys invite these kids in to initially introduce them to Jesus, but your hope is that they will then plug into the local church where they can go deeper for discipleship. Because these kids need to know about Jesus. Clearly, they don't have a foundation.
Yeah,
Speak
can
to
I
that.
say something about that as far as church? I think it's an interesting thing that's happening, that denominations are kind of dying off as older generations go, or there's a lot more non-denominational churches, or it's interesting to see what draws millennials and Gen Zs to church. But here's my encouragement as someone who's at church: if you notice somebody that's younger, like, welcome them, make them feel welcome, have a place at that church to make them feel like they belong there. Because I think these generations growing up are going to watch sermons online, they're going to listen to podcasts, they're going to listen to music, and they're going to lack that relationship of what a community could be, like a Bible study like this. That might not attract them. And so, but you can be a part of inviting them into a different culture, a different community.
Yeah, that's so good. So good. Any other final closing things that you guys want to say? This has been so great. Yeah? Yeah? Final words of encouragement?
I don't know, I guess more than anything, with me and my generation, I just know that, we all have this innate longing in us to be loved and to be loved by something greater, and there's truly nothing more impactful than seeing, our young life girls or different people in our life coming to know how great God is. And so I have this desperate desire to share that with everyone, and I know we all have that desperate desire too. So I think it's just so incredible that this generation is here with this much longing to learn about him. Just so desperate for it. And so we could really be that impact in their life to show them Jesus' great love. So.
And even if they don't verbalize that they recognize that they need that great love, because they're being raised in a day and age of post-Christian, relativism, those kind of things, they are hurting, they are broken, they're scared, they're anxious. And so the very fact is that they're living in this very dark world. And I truly believe that we as Christians, our light is going to shine ever greater than ever before in the darkness that we are seeing. So I think that Gen Z is situated in a place to have an incredible revival. I think because they're blank slates, they don't know. Similar to when Patrick and I went to the Czech Republic in 1995, it was 6 years after communism and the wall came down. So for 40 years, they could not believe in religion. They were taught atheism. Their generations, their parents taught them atheism, and so did communism. And suddenly Christians are flooding into Eastern Europe to teach them about Jesus. And the students that I taught were hungry. They would show up at our apartment squishing into to just learn about Jesus. Like, tell us about this Jesus guy. We don't know who he is. And they were hungry for that. And I sense the same thing in Gen Z, that this darkness is going to stir them to they know something's missing. God created that in each and every one of us, but it's going to be heightened in this generation and culture today. And so there is such an opportunity for us as we step into understanding them better, ask them tons of questions. I'm learning that. Hear from them what's going on and engage with their world in a new way. So thank you both so much for coming today. And can we just give a round of applause? All right. Well, let's wrap it up, and you guys go back and enjoy some conversation about Gen Z and how to parent, grandparent well. Love you all. We'll see you next week for the Christmas brunch. Yeah, we went a little bit late, but that's all right. I can always